when you have location freedom and time freedom, that gives you 2 degrees of freedom to live your life how you want, right? You can live anywhere, and you can, for the most part, control where your time goes. But if you don't have the financial freedom or the cash flow to be able to support the lifestyle you want, then you can only do it for so long.
We all know that real estate has created more millionaires than any other industry on the planet. We also know that it has created a lot of heartache due to mismanagement, overborrowing, and just simple life events that happen to all of us. Welcome to the CashFlowPro podcast. My name is Casey Brown, and I am your fearless leader. And although we might be bourbon sipping and at times foul-mouthed Southerners, we will always do our best to be honest, straightforward, and due diligent with all of the information we pass along to you. Welcome to the show. Hey there, and welcome to today's episode of CashFlowPro, your daily real estate investing podcast and YouTube channel. I am here with Derek Clifford of Elevate Equity. Now, this is going to be a discussion like many of you have never heard before, at least parts of it. I can assure you that Derek is probably the closest thing to an idol that I have for many reasons other than not spiritual or not anything like that. But Derek is what is called a digital nomad. And I didn't even know this term existed, Derek, until I met you in Colorado a few months ago. And at that point, I've just been like, my entire life goals shifted because this man is living a life that many folks like myself want. So Derek, how are you today?
We're doing so good. And Casey, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm excited
Absolutely.
to be here.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
I can't wait for the folks to hear your story and stories, because I know that I probably know you just a little bit better than I guess a lot of guests I have on here, partially because we spent 30 minutes talking. Actually, Derek spent 30 minutes talking. I spent 30 minutes with my jaw on the floor because I was so amazed at how this works and what it is and how it goes. So, man, I know. So for the listeners, just for a little context, Derek is joining us today from Portugal. And he and his wife are there for, I think he said 3 more weeks, and I'll let you get into everything that goes on. And then of course, we're going to dive into what the digital nomad lifestyle is, what it tends to lend itself as far as lifestyle and all that goes. So man, go ahead and tell us a little bit about how you got started, where you got started, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, for sure, man. Thanks for giving me the space to be able to do this, and I'll try to keep it as brief as I can. But basically, I ended up starting out investing in real estate completely on accident. My wife had purchased a condo in Washington State as an investment for her to be able to live rent-free, or basically just live in a place while she got her doctorate's degree. And unfortunately, her timing couldn't have been worse, because she had purchased it, I think it was in June of 2008 or something like that, literally 3 months before the crash. And once she had purchased it, the crash came, and within 6 months, her condo that she had purchased at $250,000 was worth 90. So she had this very, like, it was deeply underwater. Like, we're talking, Atlantis level underwater on this condo. And after 4 years rolled by and she was ready to graduate and move to California for her residency, we still couldn't sell the property because it was so far underwater still, right?
Sure.
So,
and who wants to take that kind of loss, even if you could afford to, or anything?
There's no way we could afford it because we were starving students,
Sure.
right? Like, I had just gotten out of school, and I've been working for a little while for an oil company, but we didn't have that kind of money. We didn't have $80,000-$90,000 to make up the difference. So what we ended up doing was we rented out the place, right? And at the time, we were both looking for ways to create passive income. And I was very much into the Dave Ramsey thing. So I was saving up a whole bunch of money, doing cash envelopes, trying to do everything I could to put as much money as I could away, pay down the debt, and then invest in the stock market, right? And, as we got our tenants in the property, and we started driving from Washington State down to Northern California for her to start her job, we got our first check in the mail, and we got a true taste of mailbox money. And I
There
looked
you
at the
go.
check and I was like, wait a minute, if we were able to do this on accident, what would happen if we really leaned into it and tried to get this going on purpose, right?
Sure.
So, after that, like kind of Pandora's box opened, right, Casey? And so
Yep.
we started going down the bigger pockets route. A couple of years later, we ended up buying, 16 units in our first 8 months of investing because we were working in the California Bay Area, making these really high salaries, able to buy and do lots of damage in the Midwest with
Sure.
that salary. So after that happened, we ran out of loans, right? Because after about
Yep.
10 loans, you can't really do any more single families. So we
Yep.
started looking into the commercial realm, commercial space. Did a JV with a couple other guys out of California. Got an 18 unit reposition done. Pulled my hair out a few times. Cutting my teeth and making every mistake you can make on that one, and
Yep.
then smarted up and got myself a mentor in the multifamily syndication space because I was running out of money, right? I could
Yep.
only put so much in. And so now it was time to gather money from other people and try to make it happen so that you bring your sweat equity to the table. So
Sure.
started working with Vinny Chopra. And then after that, got my website launched, branded, wrote a book, launched a podcast, really got excited about real estate investing, answering questions about people in the office while working a full time job on how to do
Yep.
this. And then started raising capital, found a few properties to invest in, and then started doing my own joint ventures and syndications. And, I would say about a year and a half ago is when we really started ramping up because we went from having no multifamily except for that 18 unit to now having
Yep.
over 400 units, at least in some way or form, as a either a joint venture with major equity stake or as a capital raiser with GP shares. So
Awesome.
that's our story, Casey.
Man, that's so great, and there's something to be said too about a husband and wife going at this together because there's many. For one, there's a lot of different moving parts, and especially when you can kind of delegate that and both understand what the ultimate goal is. I really just I couldn't quite let that go by without just at least putting a little highlight on that, and that's really just and of course I've met your wife, and she's a lovely lady, and I'm assuming that you all are like, do you have those tasks, like just things delegated throughout the day that or the daily stuff that, like, maybe, hey, she takes care of this or you take care, I mean, what does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. So, yes, we are partners in everything that we do. She has her own business and I have mine, and we are partners in each other's businesses. So I step in and help be her integrator for the things that she needs in her business. And then for
Yep.
mine, she helps by providing relationships, capital, and then also helping with social media. So a lot of the stuff that we're doing behind the scenes, like she is basically writing all the posts. She's helping with a lot of the bookkeeping, a lot of those things, where I am more in the front facing role, working with the virtual assistants and working with everyone to try to keep all the plates moving, doing
Sure.
deals, doing analysis, a lot of the spreadsheet work, a lot of the integrator work. So yeah, we're definitely partners, and without her, I wouldn't have the vision to even do what we're doing right now. And
Yep.
it's
Yep.
it's really incredible to have your
She's
spouse with you.
she seemed very visionary, and that
Yeah.
was that was one thing. Again, both of you just struck me as that. So with that being said, I want to kind of tie a few of these things together, and then we'll get into the whole the lifestyle stuff that we've talked about, and that's just kind of the, I think that's more for discussion purposes than it is necessarily capital raising and real estate investing. But as I prefaced this the earlier part of this was, you're in Portugal right now, and of course you have real estate deals happening. I'm assuming you haven't done anything outside of the U.S. as far as real estate capital raising and stuff, have you?
That's right. Yeah, we're mostly in the
Okay.
U.S. right now.
All right, so with that, everything, so you're in Portugal, and the things are happening in the U.S. on a daily basis. What does the network of people look like over here that you've got to kind of pick up the slack for you being over there?
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked that question because it's a lot of, hesitation that I sense from people who are looking to maybe do something similar. Um,
Yep.
the internet has enabled a lot of different things these days, right? With a little
Hmm.
bit of organization and creativity and the right people who are willing to engage with you and are incentivized to do so, you can do quite a bit from anywhere in the world. And that's kind of what we noticed when we were doing this business. For
Yep.
instance, every deal that we do, we have at least one equity partner on the general partnership side that lives in the city in which we're investing. So
Okay.
if we're offering and we're looking to put a deal together in Louisville, then we'll have someone that lives in Louisville that's there. Or if we're doing something in
Awesome.
Indianapolis, we'll have an equity partner that's there in Indianapolis as well. That way, we
Okay.
have a boots on the ground contact to help sort through some things, and they're incentivized to help us because they have equity shares alongside of
Sure.
everyone else in the investment.
Now, what does that process look like when you call somebody and you're like, "Hey, man, do you want?" Or "Hey, lady." Well, I hate to say like we're just men in this, but or if you just say, "Hey, I want you to be a partner in this deal with me, and I'm going to give you these GP shares." Where, like, do you? How do you find those people?
Yeah, I obviously it's a very long term relationship because
Sure.
there's a lot of there's a lot of moving pieces here. The first thing to know is that whenever you're getting into a partnership with someone, it's like a marriage. It's a business
Yep.
marriage, right? And
Yep.
so when you're married to these individuals, you want to make sure it's the right person, and that usually begins with a very long term relationship. There's
Yep.
networks that come behind this, and there's this kind of triangulation process where you talk with other investors who may have worked or had an experience with the person you're considering partnering with. And so you got to
Yep.
tap into those networks and say, hey, is this person like, what do you think of this person? Have they been doing well for you, or what's your feel on this individual? And so I think that combined with the fact that if you know this person for over a year, or especially ideally over 2 or 3 years,
Yep.
and there's no red flags, and then the third hint I would say is bring in your spouse to talk with the person, because if your
Yeah.
spouse can identify some red flags right up front that says, hey, this person is, I don't trust them at all, that's something you need to walk away from immediately. And so I think
Yeah, and
having that, yeah.
that gives you just those different, like, it's just that's very wise because it gives you two different angles, and some things that ladies might pick up on are some things that maybe I might just gloss right straight over, or vice versa.
Yes.
um Very, very interesting strategy to picking up and figuring that part of it out.
One other
Because
thing I wanted to say too, Casey,
Mhm.
on this, just to add
Sure.
to this, to the coloring. So on a couple of our properties in Indianapolis, we have this strategy where, okay, let's say we have two property managers, property manager A, property manager B, and then we've got um, property one and property two. Well, what
Okay.
we're doing these days is we are taking property manager A and putting them in the ownership team of property one, and
Okay.
property manager B is running the management for that property. Then
Sure.
on property
Sure.
two, it's the other way around, where we have property manager B in the ownership team, and then A is doing the property management for that. So that way you have not only complete visibility with these property managers in the ownership team, but you're getting
Yeah.
this, like, I don't want to say the sense of competition, but you're getting these two property managers who are seeing what the other is doing,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like they know that there's a common thread, which is me,
Yep.
across all of these, that's looking at both. And so it's a great way to incentivize having a great boots on the ground partner who is incentivized to do well and can know the nuts and bolts of the property down to the day-to-day operations. So that's just something I
Yeah.
thought I would pass along too about building a team.
Man, that's, oh my gosh. I mean, that's it just almost integrates it all. Like it makes it where it's, again, it brings it back to being almost self sustaining, I guess, is
Contained,
probably
yeah,
the
exactly.
right word. So,
Hmm.
or self-contained, yeah. And so with you being over there, and you have one partner on the ground that you've known for so many years, and and you said you give them the G part of GP shares, right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. All right. So we've got the property management part covered. We've got the boots on the ground as far as the person that just strictly straight up answers to you or answers to the partnership.
Hmm.
Let's talk a little bit about the capital raising side. Uh, do you run into, part of the reason why I asked that question about you living in Portugal and owning properties in the U.S. is how do the investors take that?
Hmm.
And when you're raising the capital and you're looking at saying, hey, I want you to invest with me. By the way, I'm in Portugal in the properties of Seattle or whatever. And
Yeah.
so and I just want to know how that looks from that standpoint.
Yeah, and also like I'm posting stuff on Instagram with me on the beach and everything. I kind of know where you're getting at here. I
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
totally understand. Yeah, and
Yep.
I think my the investors that I work with have built a personal relationship up with me, and so they know that me living this lifestyle is just part of who I am. And
Yep.
even though we're out here, vacationing, I explain to them that we're still working just as hard as we are in the United States. Just because we're not
Sure.
physically in the US doesn't mean that we're not working hard. And I always
Sure.
remind them that, they're always getting preferential treatment, which means they're part of a pref return where when funds come in from the property, they're the first ones to get paid.
Yep.
And they like this lifestyle. A lot of people that are working with see this lifestyle and they're like, man, that's really great. Like, I want to be a part of this. And
Yep.
I tell them that one of the best ways to do this is to start investing in real estate. Learn how to do it as a general partner if you want,
Yes.
but in the process, work with me as a limited partner so that you can see how I'm doing this. And then you can
Yep.
spread this out to people that you know and eventually do the same thing for them.
Yep. Well, I guess without further ado, you've made the mention of the same word that I made mention of earlier, and that's lifestyle.
Yeah.
I guess let's dive into a little bit. Um, I think there's a part of this that people are probably wondering, why is this guy in Portugal? What's the whole deal with this? So why don't you go ahead and start with the I think you all kind of got going in the Bay Area, and then of course your wife and her business and how that all looks. So go ahead and tell us what
Yeah.
what is being a digital nomad.
Yes. So a digital nomad is basically a couple or an individual who doesn't have a fixed home at all, so to speak. More or less, you're basically traveling from place to place, and as long as there is an internet, hence the digital, and you have a
Yep.
place to stay, hence the nomadism, then you can do your job and you can sustain your lifestyle and quite well or quite comfortably. So we kind of fell into this because of COVID. And we're big believers of the 3 degrees of freedom. We talk about that all the time, which is location, time, and financial freedom. And a lot
Yep.
of people look at this financial freedom thing or the FIRE movement as like one giant thing. Like you got to be financially free and then you can go live your life. Well, I don't
Yep.
necessarily quite agree with that because it comes in layers, right? You have this location freedom, which many people from the COVID era now have currently, where they could literally pick up, and as long as they have an internet connection, they could be somewhere. There's that
Yep.
location freedom. Then there's time freedom, which is the freedom to be able to choose what to do with your time. That comes a little bit later on as you get more into the business world. Maybe you set yourself up with a flexible situation where you can work a job as many hours as you want to and when you want to a certain degree. That gives you some time freedom. So when you have location freedom and time freedom, that gives you 2 degrees of freedom to live your life how you want, right? You can live anywhere and you can, for the most part, control where your time goes. But if you don't
Sure.
have the financial freedom or the cash flow to be able to support the lifestyle you want, then you can only do it for so long. So
Yeah.
there's these 3 layers, right, that you can start to tackle these degrees of freedom in. And we realized that, you know what, we need to start looking for these, get our degrees of freedom out there. Let's start with location freedom. So what we did was we sold our house in May and started traveling around California, right? And I was still working a full-time job in May last year. But as I was traveling, we had the freedom to live in Lake Tahoe in California, go up north towards Oregon. Like, we could live anywhere we wanted to as long as we had an internet connection. But then, I started to wonder, like, what would happen if we really bet on ourselves?
Yeah.
And do we owe it to ourselves to do that? Because when we sold our house, because of COVID, we had all this excess cash coming in from the sale of our home, which some of it we invested in various places, and the other we had to live on for a little while. And so we said, you know what, let's make the jump. Like, the worst thing that could happen, Casey, is that I just got to go back and get my full time job again. That's
Oh
how
my
we
gosh,
figured.
I couldn't imagine. I
So,
couldn't imagine.
yeah, it would
I
be
thought that
terrible.
and I will interject there. And when I first graduated college and started working, I worked for somebody. And
Hmm.
then so this is like one more layer up, because when I started working for myself, I was like, man, I couldn't imagine having to go back and somebody telling me what to do, this and this. And
Yes, sir.
you're like, I couldn't imagine having to live in one spot and have to go, so it's just like it's like one level further than even the separation of somebody having working for theirself, I guess. So
Yeah.
man, and so give us just a little rundown. So you started in you said you lived around Lake Tahoe for a while. So give us a little rundown of some of the places you've lived.
Yeah, I could show you guys a Google map on the screen, but basically we started in California for the first couple of months. We went down to Palm Springs first, down in like the resorty desert areas, then went up like towards Yosemite, also in
Mm-hmm.
California, where there are like all these amazing trees and gorgeous nature. Then we went from there to Lake Tahoe, and then from Tahoe we went to Reno, then Reno to Salt Lake City, and then Salt Lake City we went to, I think, Kansas City for a while.
Oh wow.
Yes. And
Okay.
then we were in Colorado definitely because we had like an event there, and my mom and dad lived there, so we said hello to them. Then we went to, yeah, Kansas City, St. Louis, then Indy. We were in Indy for like a month, and that's
Okay.
where like the whole leaving the job thing started to really materialize. And I kid you
Okay.
not, Casey. So we had the 2 degrees of freedom, right? We had time
Yep.
and we had location, but I didn't
Yep.
have like any sort of income source coming in. Like we knew that I had a reservoir of cash and we
Okay.
had full control of our expenses. And that's another thing I really want to pound home to some of these people that are listening is that you may think you may not be ready for this, but if you're living in the California Bay Area, there's like a $7,000 mortgage, food and taxes, another $2,000 per month on top of that, right? All that stuff. And
Sure.
so when you're traveling about, we're actually cutting our living expenses down to like half of what we were living in the Bay Area, and that's with us moving. And so that's really what kind of got the gears going, and it got us to a
See.
point where we had our time freedom, our location freedom, and now that our expenses were lower, we had some passive income coming in from our real estate investments.
Sure.
That put
Sure.
us in the financial freedom bucket because we had full control of where to live. Does that make sense? Anyway,
Yes, it makes
so
sense, and it makes perfect sense. I mean,
so
it's
yeah, absolutely. So when we got to Indianapolis, right, once we got there, that's when leaving the full-time job made full sense because we got 4 deals under contract, right, because of
yeah.
this. And I think that people who we've been working with, like investors, have been watching the story and they were super excited about what was happening in our life. And the
Yeah.
brokers that we were working with were like, man, this is freaking incredible what you're doing. Let's do this. Like, let's get these deals going. And we got
Yeah.
all 4 of these deals closed in the next like 3 to 4 months. And everyone was super excited. We were all super excited, and it's just been an incredible life, and it's just a testament to how as soon as you close the chapter or close the book on one part of your life, another
Yeah.
one will open. As long as you do the work, you're working so hard at a side hustle, and if you
Yep.
have something to jump into, people are going to sense the excitement, and your own energy, you're going to step into it. So a lot of this was trusting myself. My wife was really instrumental in helping me understand that making the jump away from a full-time job into our self-governing, like, we're doing our own business type of thing, we're going to land on
Yeah.
our own 4 feet. So a lot of it was getting out of my own way. And yeah, from there, we just kept
Yeah.
traveling. So yeah.
Hi, this is Casey Brown, host of the CashFlowPro podcast and YouTube channel. Have you been thinking about investing in real estate but just don't know where to begin? I'd like to help by inviting you to check out our website at www.3000capital.com. There you will find an array of material that will help you learn all about real estate syndication. And while you're there, be sure to check out our free video series download titled 5 Must Know Keys to Success in Passive Real Estate Investing. I'd also like to personally thank you for making CashFlow Pro part of your day. Now, back to the show. I think there's a good lesson to be learned in exactly what you just said, getting out of your own way, because I've even experienced this, and I think I'm sure that the thing is that if I've experienced it, you've experienced it. There's a good chance that there's a pretty good vein of people out there that are the same way, and sometimes just getting out of your own way, or knowing that you need to get out of your own way, is like a, like, that's not even a small win. That's like a big win, because once you realize that, and the thing about what you've got going on that I think a lot of people probably struggle with, and probably myself included, is the control.
Mm.
The control of saying, because I know when I was overseas a couple of months ago, we've got ring cameras at our house.
Hmm.
Now, of course, you don't have a house here, so that's not necessarily a big deal. But um, we've got ring cameras, and one of the things that almost to a certain degree kept me up at night, I guess, if you will, was me going to sleep knowing that it was afternoon at my house, and waking up and seeing some random ring camera activity going on. Now, of course, thank the good Lord, nothing happened. But what I'm getting at is the control of what was going on here, or even worse, it being middle of the day over there, and my ring camera going off, and it's a cat walking across, but still, it gets your heart pumping, and you just, so the control of things is really something that I feel like a lot of folks would have to get over. And I want to know if that was something that maybe you struggled with, or something you had to come to terms with, that, hey, I need to just kind of let all this go.
Yes, and I have to admit that it is still a struggle. It always will be for me because that's the type of person who I am. I'm an
Sure.
engineer by training. I like to take responsibility for my investors and for myself and all my decisions. And so sometimes, it gets to a point where it just isn't like it's self-destructive. And
Yep.
my wife has been super helpful in helping me understand where these blind spots are, that
Yeah.
where it makes sense to think about and where it doesn't make sense to think about these things. And it's a
Yeah.
little bit of like you have to detach yourself, because what control do we truly have? I mean, let's be honest, like taking your example, Casey, like if something did happen to your house while you were abroad, what
Yeah.
can you really do? Like you can call the police maybe, but
Yeah. I mean,
like
that's,
what can
yeah.
you really do? So at that point it's kind of like it's almost in God's hands anyway at this point.
Sure.
And so that's kind of what we figured is, we can act from a place of wisdom, or we can act from a place of fear. And we've chose to believe in ourselves and know that things are going to be right. And that's kind of how like this whole money thing works with us. Like I have been so like controlling about the money side, like doing the Dave Ramsey thing, like trying to get out of
Yep.
debt, doing all that. And right now, like when we went into this thing, we had no source of income coming in, but we had full control of our expenses. We had a reservoir of cash. We had full control of our expenses, but I still was miserable every day because it's like we're not making any money and we're spending money every single day, right? And nothing's coming
Yep.
in. But eventually you come to a point to realize that if you need money, you'll get it. You go back to work,
Yep.
you just handle it. Like it's just the way that life rolls. So there's no reason
Yep.
for me to worry about that. And people sense that abundance. People sense that, and people can
Yep.
hear it in your language, and then it just attracts more and more people. So I'll stop there.
Well,
Yeah.
and and there's a lot of psychological plays on that too, because the thing is, and I noticed this when I went through a divorce several years ago,
Mm,
and I remember my real estate sales business. All of a sudden, like, my real estate sales business was booming and blowing and going. I mean, I couldn't for the life of me make a bad move. I mean, I hate to say that, but then all of a sudden, once my mind was shifted off of that, because I had other things I needed to be worrying about, it killed it. It was like
mm.
somebody took it out back and shot it. And so I was just like, it was very, and it wasn't anything more, I think, than the potential client's sense of, hey, I'm going to kind of shy away from this because I think there's a, you know what I'm saying? So it's the psychological stuff that I think is almost more at play than actually just cashing the check. You know
It's
what I'm
it's a
saying? Does that
hundred
make sense?
hundred percent true, Casey. Like I think that I heard this from one of my mentors. I think it was Vinny, or maybe it came from someone before that. But in any event, what they told me was you can tell how much money someone has in their bank account or how much they're worth based on their mindset. And
Yeah.
if you have a seven-figure mindset, and yet your bank account is only showing $100 in it, it's just a matter of
Yep.
time before the world catches up to you.
That's
That's
right.
just the way that it's going to work. And the vice versa is true as well, right? If you have a five-figure mindset and you have $1 million net worth because of an inheritance or lottery or
It's
something
gonna.
like that, the world has a way of evening itself out. And so the lead
Yep.
indicator is always the mindset. What type of mindset do you have? That's going to determine your capacity, how many problems you're willing to solve to help other people, how you're going to
Yep.
protect yourself, the quality of your network. All of that is determined by that mindset. And it's definitely
Yeah.
the lead indicator. So that's what we were exercising here for our advantage for sure.
Yeah, and that's man, and that's I think so true for so many people. It's all about a mindset. And I've been there where you're looking at all the Instagram and you're scrolling and everybody's telling you, well, it's all about mindset or it's time to level up or this, that, the other. And it's like that's really easy to say to somebody, but then when it comes time for my kids to open the bread drawer and there's nothing there,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's like you have to find a medium where you kind of pull from one to get to the other and so anyway, but man, we could go on about that stuff for days. It's just so intriguing to me that there's, and I guess that lifestyle has probably existed for quite some time. I mean, especially if you're, now I think Airbnb definitely put some fuel on it. What does, just real quick before we've got to jump off here because
Mm-hmm.
we're kind of running out of time, but
Sure.
what do you, so basically you all could handle a pretty considerable increase in the costs of Airbnb if you're only at half of what you would be owning something in the, well, I guess the Bay Area is a little bit of a
Yes.
stretch for
Yes.
most
Yes.
of us, but owning something and maintaining something and taxes and all of that stuff, you've got some pretty good wiggle room there to say, hey, if these Airbnbs continue to rise, we can live this way until it gets to this.
Correct.
Um, so is that kind of in the, is that kind of something you're watching?
Yeah, I think that it's just the nature of the industry and the nature of society in general right now is to become more mobile. I'm starting to notice that individuals who are able to leave their um, let's say their full-time digs, right? They have travel itches and they want to do
Sure.
that. And I have a feeling that as the newer generation gets older, right? Like as our generation
Yep.
starts to get into like where the boomers are now, our kids,
Yep.
for instance, I believe that they will be increasingly in a society where it's very common to own nothing,
Yeah.
where we have a rental economy for everything, right? And I just believe that that's the model. So I think that even though Airbnb is doing it with a certain way, I think eventually there's going to be maybe a cryptocurrency type thing going on, or like some organizations or investors that specialize in this type of thing themselves. And it's not just going to
Yep.
be Airbnb and Verbo that's doing this. I just think that it's so appealing to live like this,
Yep.
that it's going to be more of a thing. I know if you have kids, it's different, but I'll tell you right now, Casey, like we have between my wife and I, the only thing that we own right now is literally six pieces of luggage and a car in the United States. That's all we have. And isn't that
And
awesome?
how do you get around there? Just the train and buses and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, you can rent cars out here, right, if you need to, but generally in
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Europe, they have fantastic public transport.
Yep.
And the cost of living out here is on par or cheaper than in some of the places in the US that we were living in, like the Bay Area, for instance.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah. And then that's when of course prices have gone up. But when we stayed on the Mediterranean in South France, I mean, man, it was like that room in a condo complex and even Gulf Shores or somewhere that's somewhat of a reasonable destination, it was like a fourth the
Yes,
cost of that on a nightly basis. So it
100%.
was but especially if you're, if you're building out that passive income stream and everything is kind of coming together like that, I mean, man, that's killer, dude. So all
Yeah.
right, well, we're running out of time, but a couple of different things that I want to do. The first thing I want to know is what is the best book that you have recently read or are hoping to read in the near
Mm.
future?
Man, there's so many. There's so many out
I
there.
know, it's a tough
I
question.
think that the best one that I've read beyond the one thing is The Gap in the Game. That book has completely changed our lives, right? And it came out in the right possible time. And it just talks
Sure.
about how a lot of people set goals by looking and comparing other people and where they should be, quote unquote.
Yep.
And that's like a lack mentality. Instead, you should look at
Yep.
where you are right now and how far you've come based on when you started this whole
Yep.
adventure, and extrapolate
Yep.
from there based on the past and gratitude, and not looking from lack and comparison. Anyway,
Awesome.
yeah.
And that's great. All right. And I know this is going to be a little bit of a twisted question for somebody that basically vacations on a daily basis, but where is, if you had to stop everything and say, hey, I want to take and go somewhere for a week, or maybe even somewhere that you've been on vacation to, what's the best vacation you've either taken or hope to take?
Man, there's so many places on the bucket list right now, but I will give a tried and true answer. There are, so I used to live in Germany. I did my undergraduate, I did 1 year of living abroad in
Mhm.
Germany, and I lived in Berlin and Munich. And there are places outside of Berlin and Munich where they have little bath towns, where
Yep.
basically you just rest and relax. They have mineral waters and all that. And so I would say like just the thermal baths called Therme in
Yeah.
Germany are one of my favorite things to do. And there's a whole bunch of them outside of every major city. So that would be where
Wow.
to take a
Okay.
vacation for sure.
Awesome. Well, definitely something outside of the normal that we hear on here. I like that. Okay. So maybe somebody heard something today that they want to reach out to you about, or maybe they're even potentially saying, "Hey, I'd like to invest that guy so that I can further my story by hearing his story, or whatever the case is." How can the listeners reach out to you if they'd like to get in touch
Yeah,
with you,
yeah,
Derek?
we would love it. And thanks for giving the space here for that.
Sure.
Everything is available on our website, which is elevateequity.org. Of course, you guys can email me at derek@elevateequity.org, but everything is pretty much there on the website. Our podcasts, our blogs, videos to our YouTube channel, everything is pretty much on there, and a book that we released for working professionals who are wanting to do something on the side. And then we have a whole bunch of free stuff out there, lead magnets, all kinds of great things that ebooks out there, like everything that you could possibly want. We've got you covered. So come check us out at
Awesome, man.
elevateequity.org.
That's sweet. Good deal, dude. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate you sharing everything about from getting started in the capital raising business to the digital nomad lifestyle. And if you heard something you want to reach out to Derek about today, he gave you his email. That's elevate ELVATE. There will also be a that website, the web address in the show notes. So, Derek, thanks, man. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of the day.
This was a blast. Thank you, sir.
CashFlowPro is hosted by Casey Brown, founder and CEO of 3000 Capital, a commercial real estate investment firm committed to providing its investors with ongoing cash flow and helping them build long-term wealth. If you enjoyed today's podcast, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll be notified about all our future episodes. You can find more information about us and our investment philosophy by clicking the link in the show notes below. Thanks for listening.